You got Miami Beach average sale prices there up 72%. You got prices up double digits in Boca, Wellington, Bal Harbour, Delray, all across southern Florida.
It isn't called the Sunshine State for nothing. Over 230 days of sunshine per year, 600 and some miles of beach, Disney World, fancy sports cars, a wild nightlife, and of course, no income tax.
My kids nicknamed me, because we live in Orlando, they called me Disney Dad when we would come here, because I was always in a good mood.
We didn't stop hearing about Florida in 2020.
From Florida now.
Golden ticket in Florida.
It sounds like Florida. Well, you're not alone.
Some of Wall Street's biggest names like Goldman Sachs, Elliott Management, and Citadel Group have or are considering opening offices in Florida. High-profile investors like Keith Rabois, Shervin Pishvar, and John Oringer already made the move. Even JetBlue is considering it.
For years, even though people would talk about moving, it really wasn't cool among the wealthy to move to Florida. It's like, okay, you couldn't hack it in New York, go to Florida. Now, you're the chump who stayed in New York.
But it's not just COVID. Reports of Florida slowly morphing into a legitimate tech and financial hub has been loosely talked about for over a decade. In 2018, Florida solidified its place in the big leagues when $2.88 billion was raised in venture capital. That trend has continued all throughout 2020.
I think actually Miami has the opportunity within the next 5 to 10 years to not only become a tech hub, but be the largest tech hub in the United States.
Never in my 3 decades of doing this have I ever seen the level of economic development activity.
But Florida's economy has long been marked by low-paying tourism and service sector jobs, inequality, and ravaging climate change. It's ranked near bottom for affordable housing and health and unemployment insurance access.
As much as people understand Florida to be a beautiful place to go and vacation, there is almost a synonymous or parallel understanding that the state of Florida is backwater hell for a lot of people.
As consumer and employment behavior shifted during the pandemic, quality of life became a priority. And Florida seemed like an obvious choice, at least on the outside. 3 Floridian cities were among the top 6 choices for New Yorkers fleeing COVID. So can Florida become the next big tech and finance hub? In December 2020, venture capitalist Dillian Asparuhoff tweeted, "Okay guys, hear me out. What if we move Silicon Valley to Miami?"
And it was sort of this first moment where I'd say the crack in the foundation of my belief in San Francisco sort of occurred.
Within hours, Miami Mayor Francis Suarez responded, "How can I help?"
By the time I visited in March, actually had more late stage, in particular, investors, let's say Series B and beyond, than San Francisco did. Partially because how all the sort of crossover and hedge funds have entered into venture capital and are deploying more dollars than even the venture capital firms are. And so this nexus of power was sort of already shifting, and then a lot of those have moved to Miami already, both professionally and personally. Sort of had this sudden realization where I was like, oh my God, now being here, I got to here. So that happened on a Friday night, and by Sunday night, we had put a bid in on a house in the design district.
Dillian's tweet and eventual move has fueled momentum that Suarez and other locals have capitalized on. From conversations with celebrities like David Beckham and tech billionaire Peter Thiel, to SoftBank's pledge to invest $100 million in the city. The notion that high-earning jobs in tech and finance could migrate down to Florida has locals buzzing.
Pre-COVID, we had landed maybe 50 or 60 financial service firms. Many of them had somewhere in the range of $500 million assets under management. Now we're seeing companies that have assets under management well over $1 billion.
The state has many draws. Aside from the sunshine, its welcoming business climate is high on the list. According to the Tax Foundation, after Wyoming, South Dakota, and Alaska, Florida is the 4th friendliest business state in the country. No individual income tax and low corporate and unemployment insurance taxes. Looking at more than 60 measures of competitiveness, CNBC ranks the state 12th, 4th for access to capital after California, New York, and Texas.
It was around tax season, and my accountant jokingly said to me, "Why don't you go move to that house you built down there and stop busting my chops every April 14th? I was like, all right.
Cassaberry is a member of Tiger 21, a peer membership network for high net worth individuals. He moved his family of 6 to Orlando about 6 years ago.
Lifestyle is fantastically obvious. The weather's great. There's beaches all over the place. You're on either coast. Airports are fantastic. You'd be all over the country very quickly. But really what's happening down here is really incredible. Everywhere you drive around, you see building. The past few years, we saw it happening. Then, tack on COVID, and it just exponentially changed the impact.
The influx of the wealthy has reflected in real estate sales, too. South Florida home sales valued $1 million and above jumped between 40 and 50% in 2020 compared to 2019.
This is a long-term move for these companies, and I don't believe that they would be signing 8 to 10-year leases with options to expand. I don't believe that they would be putting their kids in schools and uprooting them from their private schools and public schools in New York, Boston, and Connecticut if this weren't long-term. And I don't believe that they would be buying $20 million homes if this were short-term.
There is so many amazing, talented people from every standpoint, from marketing standpoint, from creative standpoint, from leadership standpoint, and people are always willing to move. If I was telling people to move to Nebraska, it might be a little bit difficult to sell.
The average financial salesperson or analyst in Florida makes about half of what they'd make in New York. That could be a deterring factor for individuals choosing between job offers in New York or Florida.
We have a company that we recently offered, a term sheet here to an LA that had said, for the past 3 or 4 years that they've been building their company here, had really struggled to find the talent that they needed locally in Miami, and also really struggled with being able to import talent. And they said that over the course of COVID, and in particular now with Miami Tech Week flipping, they're basically importing talent left and right, and they're able to sort of get their pick of the litter of the top tier engineers in the world.
Migration trends are a strong indicator of growth. Between 2010 and 2019, Florida received over 2.3 million more people than it lost, the highest in the nation. The population grew by nearly 15% in the last decade, but more than half of that growth came from people aged 60 and above. In 2020, contrary to many reports, population growth was expected to slow down. According to an independent analyst on cell phone data, migration to Tampa and Orlando surged, but dropped sharply in Miami. The overall impact ended up being roughly neutral.
The creation of millionaires it happens in New York City. It doesn't happen in Florida. Florida is a place where millionaires go to retire. If you're a young person thinking about, where am I going to launch my career? New York is still, where it's at, and that'll be the story next year and 10 years from now.
Florida's economy has come a long way over the past 50 years. In 1963, it was the 11th largest economy in the country. Today, it's the 4th, just behind New York. Florida's gross state product, which is commonly used to measure the health of an economy, also stayed well above the national average in the 7 years prior to COVID. Except for the dips in the 2008 recession, employment grew in every category until 2020.
True health of an economy is really how the quote-unquote bottom is doing, how are our teachers doing, how our public sector workers are doing. And you will see in Florida, just like in every other state, that teachers are going mad trying to provide some sort of education for children. Parents are going mad trying to provide some sort of lives for their children and lives for themselves. The economy is not healthy, right? Very few are healthy.
Just like anywhere else in the world, COVID was tough on Florida. Real GDP fell 2.9%, and despite its lax COVID closures and the stories of mass influx of people, between Q3 and Q4, the state only grew 3.1% in comparison to other states with no income tax like Texas and Tennessee.
It's hard to believe that there's this rise of Florida. Florida has a growing population, and that's mostly a lower income earning population that are leaving, the New York area, the New York metro area, because, again, of enormous affordability problems,
While an immense amount of wealth enters Florida annually, median income in the state is about 13% below the national average. Most employed Floridians work in construction, restaurants and food services, and elementary and secondary schools. Inequality is increasing over time, and the state spends less on public services like health and education per capita than any other state in the nation. That has resulted in social and economic problems like suppressed low and middle income wages, social fragmentation, poor health, and violence.
There's 2, 3, 4 different Floridas that people live in. There's the tax haven Florida, where people can lay out on the beaches or sit in their penthouses. There's the Florida of tourism, where people could go to Disney. And then there's the state of farm workers who work from sun up to sundown, get shuttled from school buses from their homes, have no protection, usually have no papers. There's a life of Black people who continuously live with no representation, have the worst jobs in the state. The best things that you know about Florida on those beautiful postcards are at the expense of Black people, of immigrant people, Haitian folks, African folks. These are the invisible people who make Florida run.
Spending more than a year working from home has reassured companies that they can cut back on pricey New York City or San Francisco offices while maintaining revenue. And Florida has benefited from that shift. But for it to become an epicenter could take time. It took New York City centuries to build its agglomeration and economies of scale. It remains to be seen if and how South Florida can accomplish that.
What really excites me about Miami is ethos that everybody here is really excited about, right? Pro-technology, pro-capitalism, pro-immigration, cheap housing, low cost of living, low taxes. Being able to grow into that, I think, is really important. And all the early signals to me seem, quite positive. But it'll be interesting to see sort of in September and October, are you still seeing this continuous exponential growth?
This is all real. This is not a dipping of the toe in the sand. We know this because they're talking to local accountants and local attorneys, and the traffic is very high to those offices.